Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Richard Moore, and welcome to the June episode of the Business Lincolnshire live show. The whole aim of these monthly shows is for us to engage with businesses across Lincolnshire, share the support, programmes and financial support that's available, and also highlight different sectors across the county, and to answer any questions that you may have as business owners about the county and how we work in the county. We're also going to have a diverse range of guests joining the show, so share their insights on the county as well. How to get involved? Well, if you're on the LinkedIn Live event at the moment, you'll see there's a chat area just to the right of you, or to the left of your screen, just down the left-hand side. You can engage live with the show there. So if you want to ask questions or feedback on the show, then feel free to fill in your comments on there. You can also view the show on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube, or on the Business Lincolnshire website as well. So make sure you get involved with the show. These shows happen once a month and they're really there for your benefit. We're trying to share value with you for this show. Now, this week's show is all about the visitor economy and tourism across Lincolnshire and Rutland. And we're going to be joined, first of all, by Mary Powell, Tourism Manager for Lincolnshire County Council. And Mary's going to bring the county to life with an amazing set of slides and share some stories with us about the county and the amazing county we live in. We're then going to move across and have a panel discussion that's going to be led by Gill Harvey. She's the Visitor Economy Specialist for Business Lincolnshire, the Growth Hub, and she's going to answer tourism with a panel of guests, going to answer questions on tourism, holidaying and short breaks and the benefits that that has for the local economy. Jill's going to be joined on the panel by four guests. We've got Sarah Colbert. She's a travel and tourism tutor from Boston College. We've got Liz Parry from Abby's Group. We've also got Lewis Phillips from Dedicated Hospitality and Amy Conyard, the co-owner of Bottomley Distillers Limited. So it's a busy show ahead. And I suppose the last 14 months, there's never been a better time to really hold a show like this, with all of us planning our summer breaks for the year, and obviously trips abroad are more or less out at the moment. So staying local and staying in the UK is going to be what most of us will be focusing on. So never been a better time to know what's right on our doorstep in Lincolnshire. The other thing I recommend you do is go to visitlincolnshire.com. It's a fantastic website all about Lincolnshire, and that's just an amazing resource for things to do in Lincolnshire as well. So let's get on with the show and bring Mary into the show.
Lincolnshire County Council.
Hi Mary, are you all right?
Fine, thank you. I'm going to talk to you about telling the story. I've got pictures running throughout, so you've got something nice to look at while I'm talking. This is the way that I see Greater Lincolnshire and Rutland. It's a wonderful mix of city, coast and countryside. Variety everywhere you look. The heritage of Lincoln and the market towns. A coastline that mixes fun and thrills with nature at its best, and all linked with huge sandy beaches. It's all set in lovely countryside. The rolling wolds, the Lincoln Edge, Rutland Water and the mysterious fens, all with charming villages. In every view, a spire or a tower. There are over 600 churches in the county. But I don't like tourism cliches. The undiscovered this, the off the beaten track the other. To me, it's the stories that bring Lincolnshire to life, giving it personality and individuality. It may be a rural backwater now, but in former times, this was a wealthy county with plenty of medieval wheeling and dealing going on. Lincolnshire played key roles in both world wars, building aircraft, the first tanks, and home to many airfields. Henry VIII called Lincolnshire the most brute and beastly in the realm, and this speaks to our independent spirit. We like to do things our own way. Quite right too. I'm going to tell you some Lincolnshire stories just to show you what I mean and give you a taster of what we have to offer. Skegness was just a village in 1873 when local landowner, the Earl of Scarborough, decided that the popularity of the seaside could only grow. He commissioned plans for a model watering place with wide tree-lined streets on a grid system, promenades, gardens and a pier. The Earl was right, and when the Great Northern Railway Company commissioned John Hassell in 1908 to draw the Skegness is So Bracing poster featuring the Jolly Fisherman, its success was secured. This most famous of adverts was to promote a special 3-shilling excursion from King's Cross. Skegness continued to make tourism history when in 1921 a poor travelling showman, Billy Butlin, set up his hoopla stalls here. By 1929 he'd opened a large amusement park, and by 1935 had built the Butlins holiday camp. There are coastal resorts that have come and gone. RSPB Freeston Shore is now home to thousands of migrating birds, but in the first half of the 19th century it was a popular seaside resort, with visitors arriving by charabancs, at least 2 hotels, and horse racing on the beach. Now there remains barely a trace. As you walk or cycle along the coast, look out for the fortifications built to protect Britain against German invasion. Begun after the evacuation at Dunkirk, the coastal crust was designed as a first line of defence against invasion. It involved many types of structure, some of which can still be seen: pillboxes, searchlight batteries, anti-tank structures, and machine gun posts. The gun emplacements were camouflaged as bungalows, ice cream parlours, or chicken sheds, and the linear marks bisecting fields are probably anti-landing trenches dug to prevent aircraft landing. Much survives along Lincolnshire's coast as an evocative reminder of the desperate days of 1940. These concrete remains, even a pillbox in a peaceful churchyard, they're recent history and give the landscape added meaning. The history of the RAF is much more visible, with disused wartime airfields across the county, together with some still active. The sights and sounds of the RAF are never far away: the Red Arrows practicing a new manoeuvre, the strangely shaped AWACS on their practice runs around Waddington, the Eurofighter, or the Lancaster Hurricanes and Spitfires of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, returning to RAF Coningsby after a weekend display. There were almost 50 air bases during the war. Each was like a small town, and you can just imagine what their impact must have been on the lives of such a remote rural population. The International Bomber Command Centre on the edge of Lincoln commemorates the nearly 58,000 men and women from 62 nations who lost their lives supporting Bomber Command. The 31-metre tall spire is in direct sight of Lincoln Cathedral, which provided such an important landmark for crews both leaving and returning from missions. The Dam Busters raid was flown from Lincolnshire, considered an almost impossible task, flying low at night over hundreds of miles of enemy territory to drop a new, untested bomb. There is no doubting the bravery of 617 Squadron or the ingenuity of aircraft designer Barnes Wallis and his revolutionary bouncing bomb. There are many aviation heritage sites that tell these stories, but do visit a much smaller memorial to be found in the graveyard of the village of Scopwick. High Flight, a poem loved by aviators, was written by 19-year-old John Gillespie McGee, a wartime Spitfire pilot with the Royal Canadian Air Force. He was killed in 1941 when his plane collided in mid-air over Lincolnshire. High Flight, written on the back of an envelope, was sent home to his parents weeks before the crash. "Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth," the poem's first line, was quoted by President Ronald Reagan after the Challenger disaster. There's no surprise that Lincoln Cathedral is such a landmark. William the Conqueror picked this strategic site of a former Roman fortress to build his castle in 1068 and the cathedral in 1072. They're very clear messages, proclaiming his power and dominance to his new population. One the stick, the other the carrot. Lincoln Cathedral has hosted Parliament, welcomed kings, buried queens, and withstood armed attack. The cathedral's sister building, Lincoln Castle, is clearly William's stick, sending out his "I'm in charge now" statement. It's a pragmatic building, functional where the cathedral is beautiful, built using lower quality stone and having money spent on it only when needed. But it was the site of the most significant battle waged on English soil since 1066. The Battle of Lincoln Fair in 1217 is so little known, but it is the reason that we're not French. King John had died in 1216, his son Henry was only 9, and the barons turned against the crown and invited the son of the King of France to take over. The deciding battle was at Lincoln. The infant Henry was represented by William Marshall, a man fated as the greatest knight in all the world. They were heavily outnumbered by the French, But Marshall planned carefully and used the local topography, and by creating a diversion, took the French by surprise, with a fierce fight taking place between castle and cathedral. The French were pursued down a steep hill, at huge disadvantage, fighting while going backwards downhill. Many were caught in the bottleneck at the southern gate and were slaughtered. William Marshall had led the Royalists to a stunning victory. This is not a battlefield as a field. Everything is still there. Castle, cathedral, Newport Arch, steep hill. Lincolnshire poet Alfred Lord Tennyson was probably the first poet to gain fame and fortune in his own lifetime. He was hero worshipped to such a degree that he was completely plagued by sightseers peering in through his window and lurking at his gate. His early life in Lincolnshire was more difficult, and his family were quite eccentric. He was one of 11 children, and they roamed far and wide, day and night. Alfred began writing poetry at an early age, and he was often seen rambling the local lanes, mumbling to himself. The Tennyson family were very early adopters of the seaside holiday, when it was still considered a very odd thing to do, and they went to stay in a cottage at Mablethorpe each year. Lincolnshire's natural coast repays visits across the seasons. This is a migration superhighway, so expect a constantly changing range of visiting birds. Not necessarily a best time, just a whole series of brilliant opportunities. A thriving colony of grey seals arrived to give birth in November to January, making for a noisy wildlife spectacle as around 2,000 pups are born at Donanook. The flowering and fruiting of the plant life adds another dimension and supports the vibrant bird and insect life. Those banks of sculptural sea holly and sea buckthorn with its vibrant orange berries are usually full of bird life and more, and it's worth standing and staring a while just to see who calls this home. Sections of the National Coastal Path are in place and work is ongoing on completing the route. Sometimes you will walk on the beach and at other times tucked behind the dunes in shelter. Rutland is England's smallest county. Its county motto is Multum in Parvo, which means much in little and rather perfectly describes it. When Rutland Water was built in the 1970s to provide water for Peterborough, Northampton and Corby, it was one of Europe's biggest man-made lakes. It has a great cycle path that encircles the water and the chance to see Rutland's iconic ospreys that feed and breed here. Oakham Castle was constructed in the 1180s, and any passing peer of the realm has had to forfeit a horseshoe on their first visit to the town ever since. This unique collection is displayed in the remaining Great Hall, which is the finest surviving example of Norman domestic architecture and sits at the heart of the town. There's nothing I like more than a bonnet drama, and Lincolnshire has frequently taken a starring role. Both the BBC's Pride and Prejudice and the film version were filmed here, Belton House and Burley House respectively. And when the BBC filmed Middlemarch, they came to Stamford and found that they could film long tracking shots without a single Victorian building, let alone a 20th or a 21st century building, getting in the way. Lincoln Cathedral has stepped in to play the part of Westminster Abbey, and Lincoln Castle has appeared in Call the Midwife and Downton Abbey. I've probably gone on far too long. I could have told you about our great adventurers Matthew Flinders, George Bass, Joseph Banks and John Smith, not to mention the Pilgrim Fathers and brothers John and Charles Wesley, known across the world. What about Sir William Robertson, commander of the British Army during the last 2 years of the First World War? Robertson is the only soldier in the history of the British Army to have risen from an enlisted rank to its highest rank of Field Marshal. I could have done stories just about people who rather prove that independent spirit and Henry VIII's view that we are brute and beastly, but I'll leave that for another day. But my view remains the same. Just tell the story. And I'm interested to hear what you all think. And thanks very much for listening.
Wow, that was incredible. And the feedback on the comments has just been really nice. Just loving the story approach. What a beautiful, diverse county we live in. Learning so much from your great Lincolnshire story. Thank you, Mary. Learning so much. Fascinating in the history of our county. I think that was a lovely slide deck as well. I was trying to keep it in time with what you were talking about at the time. That was the difficulty.
Probably not.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Mary. Right, let's move on to the panel discussion now then. I'll just bring all the panelists in. So first of all, we'll bring in Gill Harvey. As I say, Gill's Visitor Economy Specialist for Business Lincolnshire Growth Hub. Hi, Gill. How are you?
Hi, Richard. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mary. Wow, you said it all, Richard. Yeah.
Well, it really was, wasn't it? Just showed what we have on our doorstep. It's just incredible, really, in such a diverse county, as people were saying. So, Gill, what's the role of the panel discussion? Just to answer some questions and really discuss holidaying in Lincolnshire.
Well, Mary's, that was originally the point of the panel discussion, was to answer questions. But actually, Mary's beautiful stories have raised questions. So I'm going to be asking the panel, who are both business owners and residents in Lincolnshire, I'm really keen to know, did they recognise those stories? Because I certainly didn't. You know, I recognised the places, but I didn't recognise how they weave and link together. And I think as a county, if we don't recognise our own stories, how can we promote it to the rest of the world? So, yeah, I'd love to welcome Sarah, Lewis, Amy, Liz, and let's have a discussion about this.
Right, let's bring in Sarah, Liz, Lewis, and Amy as well. So welcome to everybody. If we can all go on mute, and then I'm sure Gill will introduce people and pull people into the conversation. I'll basically leave this to you from now on, Gill. I know you've got your own questions to answer. I'll go on to mute and just support you where we can.
Lovely. Thank you all for joining us. Honestly, we really appreciate your time. And I think this is a really important subject because Mary has created the most amazing picture that I wonder whether many people know exists. Sarah, if I can ask you first, I know that you did an informal poll amongst your students who are who are learning tourism and the visitor economy sector. I think you asked a few questions about what their knowledge was of Lincolnshire. Can you share that with the rest of us?
Yes. So my students come to me at age 16, and generally they come to me wanting to be travel agents or cabin crew, which is the lines that I went along from the start. It was only a few years ago that I realised actually there's more jobs out there, and that's where I got my interest in finding out more about the different job opportunities in Lincolnshire, hence why I got involved with Mary earlier in the year. Started this conversation with my young people about how they feel about Lincolnshire and what they know about Lincolnshire. A little bit scary, if I'm brutally honest, about the young people's knowledge of where they live. If they wanted to go somewhere in Lincolnshire, the first two places that they said was Skegness and Lincoln. That is their knowledge of Lincolnshire, full stop, before we, think about the Wolds or anything else. So it's really come apparent to me that how much I want my role to change in what I teach and what I deliver, and make them more aware of the county that they live in.
Lovely, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, my next question then is, do we think that's maybe a generational thing? So without making you feel very old, Lewis, because obviously you're not, but you were born and bred in Lincolnshire, you've been away, you've come back again. Would you recognise those stories that Mary told in full?
Do you know, actually, parts of them, there's certainly elements on there that I was aware of, but I've been sat here making notes from Mary's conversation, actually, and her stories of places where we ought to visit where I'd not been aware of. So, I think my mind does slightly wander with Sarah's students. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but certainly, I think when we think of Lincolnshire, we think of the rolling hills, possibly Skegness and Lincoln and Steep Hill, and associate things like that. Whereas Mary's been able to certainly share some stories that are not necessarily something you come across every day.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm going to bring Liz in now, who and the accent will give it away. Liz, you're not from Lincolnshire, you're not born and bred here, but you've been here for some considerable time and you're a very successful business person in Lincolnshire. Does that marry what you thought of Lincolnshire before you came in? So we're already seeing what residents already think of it. Was that your impression of Lincolnshire, what Mary's just said, or what was your view when you moved in?
Probably someplace in the middle, because when I came here, I holidayed first here because my husband is from here. I have been here 34 years. So I think we probably travelled out and went digging around a bit more than when you just live here. But Mary said something about standing and staring. And I think that's the one thing where you live, you don't look. So when you go away, you spend your time looking. You're not on your mobile phone walking into a lamppost. You know, you're looking up, you're looking round. I think where you live, you're inclined to head down and bustle. And I do wonder if that's, you know, Lincolnshire is such a big county with so much to offer and such diversity. But I think we're also creature of habit. So we go someplace like Lincoln City Centre and we go to the same places we've been because we liked it. But we don't then go off the beaten track to go and find, you know, the uncovered bit. So I think as British people, we're creatures of habit, but I do think that we don't stop and actually look round enough to what is actually here on our doorstep.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, Amy, just to bring you into the conversation, how can we then explore further? What can we do? It is a massive county. It might not be so easy just a day trip. How can we encourage people to explore more? I mean, one question is, does holidaying in Lincolnshire feel like a proper break or a holiday? Would it for you? If I said to you, you've got a week off, Amy, off you go, where would you like to holiday? Would you think of Lincolnshire even? Oh, I think we might be having a few problems. I think you're on mute, Amy. I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. I was always going to be one. I think, you know, it entirely depends on what your concept of holiday is. When we were younger, we holidayed in the UK every year. We did the Norfolk Broads and we did Cornwall. And so I think from my personal experience, if I didn't live here now, absolutely, I'd visit somewhere for a staycation, as they're now known. But you know, if you're from a family that has been abroad every year since you were a baby, and that's what you're used to, then would you necessarily think coming to Lincolnshire would be a holiday? So I think that's perhaps a job of changing people's perceptions. Making them realise what we've got to offer here. Just something I found fascinating about Mary's presentation is that I know at the moment we've just sold our business to a company where the people aren't from Lincolnshire and know very little about it. And as soon as we start that conversation about what do you know about Lincolnshire, all we hear back is the food. So we hear the sausages, we hear the plum bread, we hear all of those things. And I mean, Lewis is laughing, and probably Liz knows as well, being in food and drink, like that's the world that we're consumed with, and that's the world that we find, and I know me personally, that's what we find people resonate with in Lincolnshire. So it was really fascinating that Mary's entire presentation about what we should be known for, which is probably 100%, and you ask somebody external what Lincolnshire's famous for, and we get sausages. So I found that fascinating, and I think that goes again, kind of there's a lot of work to be done over changing people's perceptions about what Lincolnshire can be, and what it can offer to their holiday, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're too true. I was actually being interviewed for I was a panelist on a discussion, and one of my peers who's in the visitor economy sector, has been for 30 years, I asked her what she thought of Lincolnshire, and her first thought was potatoes. And was it up north somewhere? That was all she knew. Butlins, potatoes, and was it up north somewhere? But you know, coming back to this, if local residents don't know what it's all about, how do we promote it? And Lewis, at the risk of hanging you out to dry here, sorry, I'm picking on you quite a bit today. a little birdie told me you're off to Cornwall for your staycation this year. So why Cornwall and why not Lincolnshire?
For me, it's about the brand that's been portrayed by the tourism sector. I think of Cornwall, I recognise the rockery coastline and the ice cream on the beach, and that to me is it sounds really appealing. I've not been fortunate enough yet actually to visit Cornwall, so we may well go there and think, Cleethorpes hasn't really got much of a rival here. I think it's more than anything. I think it's distance. I think if I'm going for a staycation, I want to travel a little bit further and feel like I'm really getting away. A couple of hours in the car instead of a plane this year is maybe a recognisable length of time to go on our staycation. But for more than anything, it is the branding and the desire to go and see that what everybody talks about, what we see televised, what we see in their marketing, what we see in their brand. For me, it's about going and witnessing that for yourself. We may well be, I hope we're not, but we may well be disappointed once we arrive. I think what they've been able to do is really paint a picture of what they've got to offer, albeit probably very selective. But that's certainly to, we're a young couple with a child, and we want to go and experience what we see televised and marketed, rather than what we feel that we already know. Although I think Mary's just established to me that I don't know enough at all. So I may well be cancelling plans and turning round.
That's what we like to hear. That's exactly what we like to hear. Liz, coming back to you and what you were saying earlier, that you may have travelled around a little bit more than most because you weren't born and bred here, and the same as me, I'm just very curious, or nosy as a lot of people would say, so I try and explore. Did you find that you were more likely to go on day trips, or was it more likely, would you stay away in Lincolnshire? Would you say, oh well, I'm going to go to North Lincolnshire and we'll have a couple of nights there, or South Lincolnshire and we'll have a couple of nights there, or was it mostly day trips? I think that's quite important for businesses to understand so that they know how to attract people.
I think it's both, Jill. I think for me, we do quite a lot of day trips, especially on a Sunday, if we can. And that could be a trip to Lincoln. That could be off down to Burley House or someplace. But I've also done the stay overs as well. So love Stanford and places like that. For me, it's about doing something that's slightly different. So when I'm away, whether that's the Wolds or whether that's, we're here, the one place I don't go very often, and that's Cleethorpes. That's my problem with the colour of the sea, because I came from a place where sea's blue. But we won't knock Cleethorpes for that. It's got a blue flag, so that's amazing. But for me, it's that little bit different. So I want to do not what I'm doing now. So I like to go off to a really old market town. Even Louth. I love a day out in Louth because it's very different from Grimsby. And for me, it's just not the same, because if it's exactly the same, then I don't really feel I'm away. But what I do like is the fact that you are only maybe an hour or 2 hours in the car, rather than, especially when the kids was little, you're an 8-hour drive going to Cornwall. There was on that one. By the time you get there, everybody in the car is kind of exhausted and fed up. One of the nice things here is you can go a short distance and be in quite a different place.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. There's some good points there. Sarah, what do we do about this younger generation who have more limited knowledge than even us on the panel, who are saying we didn't know all of these stories? What can we do you think, to try and expand the stories? Because we clearly need to be promoting more of this.
It ultimately, like everything, it lies within the education system, and that's where I feel we get let down. When I get young people that come through that don't have any concept of their own geography, of whether it's, obviously I do worldwide geography, but taking it down to Lincolnshire and so forth. So we need to be making young people from primary school aware of their local area, from getting guest speakers in, or getting them to do day trips on local places, and getting them from when they're young. So you can, even my 16-year-olds now, what I deliver in the classroom will stay with them, and I can hopefully after a couple of years can see that they can start to sort of appreciate the history of where they're living, by doing the tour guides maybe of Boston that we do and so forth, and understanding the history and starting to feel a little bit of, yeah, it's okay where I live, and taking some of the negativity away that can sometimes be bombarding them. So education is key.
Yeah, thank you very much. Amy, you mentioned about a lot of people have got used to going abroad, and one of the big reasons for people going abroad is the weather. Do you think weather's a big factor in people choosing not to even day trip or holiday here, or is there a price perception? What's your view on why people might still not choose weekends here?
Yeah, I think probably a mix of both. We all love that we can pack for holiday and not have to think, do I need my raincoat or my wellies as well as my bikini, which a staycation in Lincolnshire could potentially require both. I think there is a price perception as well. A lot of people's just belief is when you go abroad, you can have dinner for €50 or whatever, and you then compare that to a UK market where if you're going for a day trip, especially if you've got children or a full family, you've spent £20 at the services, you've then spent £100 on lunch, whatever, and those costs build up. And I think there's a perception if you're going on holiday and you've got if you've got an all-inclusive, or if you've got some kind of board situation, then there is that cost save. But again, I think that comes down to education and informing people about what we can offer, collaboration perhaps. So we're at the moment looking at building our new visitor centre, and we are 100% going to start going out to local hotels and restaurants and things to see what we can look at for packages, so that we're not saying to people, hey, you've got to come to Louth and then you're going to spend £100 with us, you're then going to spend £100 on a hotel, you're going to spend £20 on breakfast or whatever, and look at what options we can do to make people truly believe they're going to get value for money by coming here, and not just value for money in a discounted sense, but that they're going to get some really, really cool experiences, whether that be from the food or hopefully from the drink and our side as well. And I think collaboration is potentially key for offering some element of package for people as well, because traditionally we just don't have that in the UK, do we? You go abroad and you have excursions, you have packages, you have all of these things, and we don't tend to see that as much here.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. That goes back as well to what Liz was saying earlier, is that's what she's looking for, is something different and an experience. And I'm going to run around all of the panel on this because we've all got our different perceptions. But do you think, or have you witnessed that people's views have changed since the pandemic? Do you think people will be doing things differently as a result of that? Or do you think we will go back to where we were before? And what are our opportunities?
I think sadly, in the early days of the pandemic, lots of people thought this was an opportunity for change. But it seems as we're coming out of it, everybody's desperate to get on a plane, everybody's desperate to get out. And don't get me wrong, that we can see in the figures that people are having staycations, Lewis, prime example. But I think people just want to get out again. And so I don't know whether the opportunity has gone. I think just kind of back to the first part of the point though, people are wanting experience for their money, and I think that's a change that we've been seeing for certainly that we've seen. That's a change we've been seeing since pre-pandemic, and whether that is a generational thing or not, I'm not sure. I know a lot of my friends and sort of peers of our age, we would much rather go and spend our money on something that we're going to remember or that we're going to do together, and it's not just going out for dinner or going out for drinks. And obviously we all love those things, and they're an incredibly important part, but we are seeing people wanting more for their money, and whether that is again a collaboration, or whether that's just that the dinner's extra special or the environment's extra special. Like you go into Liz's or Lewis's, both of these venues, and they're not just going out for tea, they're beautiful venues where you get that added value. And so yeah, I don't know what the right or wrong answer is. I just think that people want more for their money, and that can only come from us as the providers to deliver that for them. So yeah, I'm not sure if
Thank
that was
you.
useful or not.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, Lewis, Amy's just referred to the fact that, you know, and you work with a lot of hotels and pubs with accommodation and without accommodation. What's your feeling on this, and how easy is it for venues such as this to be providing those sorts of experiences?
What Amy's just said there is great to follow on from, because I think actually the points that Amy's made are brilliant. What we're finding this time round, we had a couple of months of freedom, kind of July, August last year, and we found that staycation, certainly we're in the lovely village, market town of Louth, and we found that staycation, the offer in there was much more pre-planned. People had thought about it in advance. They booked in advance. They booked their stay. So I mean, we don't offer so much as a package deal, but what we do offer is accommodation, bed and breakfast, lunch, and then, you know, the experience to be in the middle of the market town. We found that people then had gone on and booked things to do. They might have gone and visited the museum, or they've gone and visited some of the independent shops. What we're finding this time round is that people are a bit more cautious of leaving. I think previously people were wanting to do something, were booking well in advance because they just wanted to get out. They were willing to do something. They could go anywhere that we were allowed to go. I think this time around, people do seem to be hanging on a little bit more. When we're getting our staycation bookings, there's certainly a lot more last minute. There's certainly a lot less pre-planned. People arrive, don't really understand where they are. They've driven a couple of hours to get here, and then they want kind of our advice, which of course we love to give. But what we're finding is people seem to be a little bit more cautious this time round, because we just don't know. You know, we don't know. We all hope now that that's it. We're free again, but I think people seem to be a bit more cautious when they're certainly pre-planning and booking things. And again, what Amy said, we found that, you know, spend per head is something that we look at greatly within our business. But what we found is that people we're having probably more footfall, but we're having people stay for a less amount of time. So there's no opportunity for 3 courses, 2 courses, a lovely bottle of wine. You know, people are wanting to move themselves out quickly, you know, arrive, have a great experience and move on. So that's kind of been not a struggle as such, but it's certainly been a change of dynamic for how we operate the business. We're used to kind of taking the time and the opportunity to really let people enjoy their experience, whereas now people are feeling that they want to be in and out. And you know, we've got another set of bums on those seats, so it's certainly a little bit more. I don't think as such just our business. I don't know if Liz you agree, but we've certainly found that people are certainly less pre-planned and don't want to hang around as long.
Thank you. Liz, yes, I was going to ask you the same question, but just also while we're on to you, I can see we've got a question from Stuart. What are the key things we need to promote the Lincolnshire brand? We've spoken about the brand earlier. So just very quickly, before you move on to that, would you agree with, you know, are you finding the same as Lewis is finding? People are in and out? Or are there things that we can make them stay? And then secondly, let's move on to the promoting the brand question.
So, well, we're finding it different, because what we're finding, we're doing less covers, which is less people at lunch and at the evening, that people are coming for longer. Mind, we don't have accommodation, but they're staying longer, and it's more of a, so once upon a time you just pop for a quick lunch when you were at work. Now it seems to be friends meeting for lunch and spending more quality time actually when they come. But I think there is 2 people. I think there's the people that just want what they can't have. So they want to be flying to America, but they're not allowed. And there is that whole clambering after. And then I think there's the other part that is really cautious, that wants to be in places that are not busy. And one of my concerns would be going to Cornwall, Lewis, is at the fact that it is probably really, really busy. And Lincolnshire has got so much space. And if anybody's concerned about places being busy and overrun and struggling to park and things, Lincolnshire is much more your answer. I think it is the branding, and we talked on this very likely the other day, at the fact that Cornwall and all these places have been advertising for so long that they are now known as a tourist destination. And we're only really starting in the last few years, and now we've been thrown into this pandemic. I do think we should have something like maybe a Lincolnshire passport. You know, when you go abroad, you get all these things that you do that, but it tells you about the next 20 things you could do. We don't really have that joined up. And I think that the Lincolnshire Visit Lincolnshire website is amazing, because one of the problems is, as Lewis has just said, people arrive, they're not even sure where they are, and they know maybe one or two things they can do, but there is so much. And I think it is that message. We need to let people know what they can do and what is out there. And I think we keep it a little bit like it's the best kept secret. Shh, don't tell anybody, they might come.
And that's a really, really good point. And I wonder, you know, even when we promote our own businesses, we promote our own business, and that often is the case. Yes, people will sometimes mention, oh, just down the road there's this and this, but you know, should we be promoting it much more widely? You're absolutely right. This Visit Lincolnshire website is stunning, and it goes one step further, because it actually shows, you know, if you've got pets, which we know were really popular in the pandemic, there are doggy days out if you want to take your dog, or where can you stay with a dog. There are experiences, so people can see what they can do that is different and authentic, which is really, really important. So for the people who are watching, who are responsible for the branding, I've been told I've got 4 minutes left. So a one-liner from each of you on one key message for the branders. Amy, I'm starting at the top. You're at the top. What do we focus on?
Unification. I think we have a big disparity between North Lincolnshire, between Lincoln as a city, and between the wider Lincolnshire, and that's something that we found in our research recently. So yeah, I think unification, if you compare to the Visit Yorkshire brand and campaign, as much as if you are from Yorkshire, you don't necessarily relate to each other if you're from West or South or whatever, but as a brand, you visit Yorkshire, and that is strong, and it is almost impenetrable as a brand, and where we just don't have that yet. And I think exactly Liz's point about the fact we're a little bit late to the party, and I think that's something that we absolutely need to work towards.
Super. Liz, 2 words, 3 words, 4 words.
Space, place.
Done. Space, place. Excellent. Sarah. You're on mute.
Just beautiful.
Okay, perfect. Lewis.
I think I would just like us to pick something and run with it. You know, really
Okay.
identify what we are and really run with it.
Okay, perfect. We might get you on another panel to discuss what that is. I'm going to hand back to Richard, but thank you all so much. You've been brilliant panelists. I hope it sparked a lot of thought. We've got a beautiful county to sell, but I'm handing back to Richard now. Ask any questions. You can email us post the event. Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you very much, Gill. Really interesting. I'm just going to share quickly the Visit Lincolnshire again website for us. So we have that. If I can share it, sorry. So it's visitlincolnshire.com you need to be visiting. Have a look through the website. There's so much on there, so much information about the county. A lot of it aligns with the stories that Mary's been telling as well. So really is a useful resource for anybody living in the county, looking for a day out or maybe a longer break in the county. And I think it's just been really interesting the last 40 odd minutes just to see what we have on our doorstep. As I say, I think it's opened my eyes. I'm sure everybody's eyes, looking at the comments on LinkedIn, everyone who's been engaging with the show. It's been the most engaged show we've had so far out of the 3. So that's been really nice to see that everyone's so passionate about our county and what it offers people. The next BL live show, Business Lincolnshire live show, is coming up in a month's time. So that's Tuesday, the 20th of July, 2021. Again, it'll be 12 noon, so it'll be 40 minutes of your lunchtime. And it's going to be all about Lincolnshire's green agenda. So eco, sustainability in the county, and also how businesses are actively supporting across Lincolnshire, the green agenda across Lincolnshire. So again, really interesting show. I'm sure everybody has a view on it. So make sure that you attend that show. Look out for the emails coming out. And thank you, everybody, for today's show. It's been really exciting. And I look forward to seeing you next month. Take care. Bye now.